Okay, what basically got you out from Under Warren with, say, 16 of Creepy or something like that? Did you jump right into working for on a strip for King Feature Syndicate with Al, or am I wrong on this?
Well, a lot of, as always with anything over a period of time, a lot of things kind of overlap.
Right.
While I was working at Warren, Al, again, you're going to hear that name a lot.
Right.
Al was approached to do a Flash Gordon comic book for
Right.
King Features. He asked me to write some material for
Right.
that. King Features liked Al's work, was looking for someone to take over the Secret Agent X9 strip.
Right.
Al said, I'll draw it if Archie can write it.
Mhm.
We did it for 13 years,
Right.
starting back then. After about 2 years of editing the Warren books, Warren began having some financial problems, and it looked like we were reaching a point where I was giving out jobs without knowing when the artists would be paid.
Right.
I went to Warren, I said, I'm sorry you're having a hard time, but I can't
Mhm.
keep doing this. So I
have to pay the
wound
rent needs.
yes,
Right.
yeah. I wound up quitting Warren. I had been reading a lot of the Marvel stuff.
Right.
I was excited by what they were doing. I went to Marvel. I had to take the Marvel writing test, which was you'd go into Stan Lee's office. He would lecture you a little bit about what he tries to accomplish with Marvel Comics.
This, true believer, is what we do.
Yes. And if he was working on an Iron Man story, he
Right.
would have photostats of about 4 pages of an Iron Man job
Yeah.
done, and have you write those 4 pages as a
Right.
test as to how well you'd handle the Marvel characters and
Right.
style. He gave me 4 pages of Iron Man.
Right.
I wrote those as samples. I brought them in the next day.
Mhm.
He said, "This is fine. You're writing Iron Man."
Yes. History is
And,
made right
yes,
there. Right.
yes. Well, Stan had up till then had been writing almost everything himself, and as soon as he found someone like Roy Thomas or Denny
Right.
O'Neil, he began throwing off some of the mini books that he was
Right.
doing, and I guess he was ready to unload Iron Man, so I got Iron Man.
Mhm.
And
And did a very good job on it too, because it was one of my favorite books from Marvel in '68.
oh,
like
well,
that.
that's nice to hear.
Right.
That's very nice to hear. I always felt at Marvel, I was never really comfortable doing superheroes. I was an EC fan. I
Yeah.
liked horror. I liked war. I liked
Right.
science fiction. Superheroes always seemed to me like kids' comics until I saw the Marvel stuff. But I always felt like Stan and Roy Thomas did much better Marvel characters than I
I will
did.
kick myself if I don't ask you about Blazing Combat. How did you happen to get Warren into that one, or did he get you into doing that one?
Again, that was all part of once he brought out Creepy.
Mhm.
It was successful enough that he immediately wanted to do a companion magazine, Eerie.
Mhm.
And then both Russ Jones and I had mentioned to him that maybe he should try other EC style material.
Right.
We both pushed for doing the war comic.
Right.
So it sort of started while Russ was still doing a few issues.
Right.
And then I took over the first issue when Russ was fired.
Yeah. Very early Vietnam era stuff, and unique in that it was somewhat equivocal, I should say, about a position in the war.
It
65, this was like this.
I felt like the Vietnam situation sounded like a bad thing to get
Right,
involved with
right.
at the time. Nobody in government asked me, so I had to do bitter complaining stories instead.
But they didn't read comic books. That's a problem.
I guess not.
No, I guess not. Okay, jumping from there past the Iron Man, what you held down the Iron Man assignment with Gene Colan, Johnny Craig, George Tuska, the majority of
Right.
it, doing a whole lot of
You know
memorable
this stuff
characters.
better than I did.
Sorry about that. I have this terrible photographic memory for that kind of stuff that I read when I was a kid. Okay, from there, let's see. You started tapering off for Marvel about when, 72 or so, like the 71, and did you jump from there to DC doing war stuff or what?
Probably sometime in there,
Yeah.
I went back, did a little bit of work for Warren, and then began
Vampirella, probably.
probably around in there. I also went back to doing some work for Marvel, and then Carmine Infantino from DC called me because Joe Kubert, who's a guest at the convention,
Right.
was starting up the Tarzan book
Ah.
and wanted to give up about 3 of the war titles.
Right.
Because of Blazing Combat, they thought I might do a good job editing those. and I took over 3 of the war books, and then later on I took over Detective.
Right.
Which
The
gave me
memorable.
my first experience with Batman.
Right,
Which
and,
was a great one. Yeah.
Right. And let us not slight those great Batman stories you did with people like Aparo and Alex Toth.
Howard Chaykin.
Howard Chaykin, right. And, of course, the Manhunter series with Walt Simonson. Tell me something about the genesis of that.
When I took over Detective Comics, it was not selling well.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, of course, nothing was selling that well. It was one of those times. But basically, they were ready to kind of, try anything that we were willing to try. I didn't want to tamper with Batman very much because I felt like the Julie Schwartz Batman comic was the one that should really set the tone
Right.
and the direction for Batman. But I thought if we got an interesting offbeat backup feature in the
Right.
book that could kind of complement Batman, we might create some reader interest that way while not losing the Batman fans. Walt was a relatively new young artist that had impressed me with a number of different jobs, and I decided to try him on Manhunter, because basically I thought 8 pages, we're going to have to work very hard, so you need a young artist who doesn't know that he's being exploited.
And don't anybody here tell him that.
But Walt was also incredibly imaginative. I loved his storytelling, and he was just a joy to work with. It's along with Al Williamson, it's the
Right.
best teamwork I've ever
Collaboration.
done in comics. Yeah. It wasn't a case that I plotted all the stories and Walt just drew them. Walt and I were active collaborators on the storylines, on what we were doing with the characters. So it was a perfect collaboration, and you don't get that often.
Yeah, right. Jumping back to the strips, well, I won't, because Star Wars is a little bit further down in the saga. But around this time, while you're still writing Secret Agent Corrigan and doing the DC stuff, around 75, 76, something like this, you jump back to Marvel, more or less, am I right on this, as their new editor-in-chief?
I moved around a lot.
Yeah.
I like to, every couple of years, move before they really catch me at what I'm actually doing. It's, you got to always stay ahead of them a little bit. No, mostly I would...
and bill collectors the same way.
Yes. No, I'm always torn between the staff work as an editor and the freelance work as a writer.
Right.
So I would bounce around a lot. I've always been probably too undisciplined to be a full-time freelancer and too disorganized to be a full-time editor.
Right.
So I split my time between doing both and hopefully stay ahead of the wolves.